Welcome to the Bible study. My name is Kent Philpott. I always like to say who I am and where I'm from, so you can judge yourself whether or not you think this guy's worth listening to or not. But I'm the pastor of Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley, California, in my 40th year there. And we are looking at the Gospel of Mark. We're going to be in chapter 7, and we have two stories. First one is titled, What Defiles a Person? And the second is the Syrophoenician woman's faith. Syro, that's up in the area where Syria is. Syria gets its name from that location. So I present these sermons to the church at Miller Avenue before I get here on TV. I almost need to do that because preaching of the sermon is easy, doing this isn't. And I always come up with different things I title them, and one of them is called, What is the Reflection? I try to capitalize what is the core of this passage. And for me, it's faith in Jesus keeps us sound of mind and heart. Mind and heart. So the first passage, Jesus is speaking against the kind of outward showy religion that the Pharisees and, of course, the Sadducees often have. The Pharisees had 613 rules that you had to obey, some plus, some minuses, do's and don'ts. They could be very, very religious, and they would put on their acts publicly for approval. And now Jesus is going to, in the first account, is going to be reaching out to these people. The second passage is Jesus heals a woman, responds to a woman's faith, the Syrophoenician woman's faith, and he's entering into a Gentile area. This would be in the northern part of Galilee, to the west primarily, but in this case, to the west, up along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Jesus' faith, his ministry has followed him into that area. People know who he is, and we find a very unusual story of the casting out of a demon. So we're starting in Mark chapter 7, verse 14. And it's titled in the English Standard Version, What Defiles a Person? And defiles is a word that means distort, twist a person's life to the point it makes them uncomfortable, maybe finally miserable. Defiles, it harms, it hurts the individual. What defiles? And Jesus is going to be talking about this a little bit. Verse 14. And he called the people to him again. He's teaching. And every once in a while he will gather together and preach a little bit and said to them, he says, hear me, all of you, and understand. This is a typical introduction that a teacher would use to say, okay, here's a message. So in verse 15 he says, there is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him, but the things that come out of the person are what defile him. Now, he's talking about food here. It's not talking about other kinds of things that you might ingest. He's talking about food here. The Pharisees and some of the other religious people were very specific about you didn't eat a lot of stuff. There's a long list of stuff you could eat, long list of stuff you couldn't eat, from animals to seafood and so on. So what Jesus says, because, see, the Gentiles, they would be into that kind of stuff. They didn't have the prescriptions, and so they would be looked down upon by many of the religious people. But he says, what comes in, what you eat, will not defile him. And then verse 17 he says, and when he had entered the house and left the people, the crowd, his disciples asked him about the parable. That was a parable that he told, that verse 15. And by the way, that was verse 15, and there's no 16. There's no verse 16. There was hundreds of years later, and I'll tell you what that was. If a man has ears to hear, let him hear. But in the best manuscripts, like Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, and others, that verse does not appear. So it goes from verse 15 to 17. Verse 17 says, when he entered the house, left the people, the disciples wanted to know what he was talking about. Verse 18, and he said to them, then are you also without understanding? Now you could say that in a way that you might consider it a negative reply or negative response from Jesus to the apostles, but the commentators able to go back in other instances, even prior to this period, notice that this was a rather common sort of a thing. It's a setup. He's going to begin now to explain, and that's essentially what it is. Then he says, do you not see that whatever goes into a person, that food, from outside cannot defile him? And I could go into, he's probably talking about the proscriptions that Jewish people had against all kinds of different animals, like pigs, and all kinds of creeping things, and things that fed off on the bottom of the oceans and so on, that you couldn't eat those. There was prescriptions against it. But he says, whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart, in the Greek heart is cardia, but his stomach, and is expelled. Okay, so this is very simple. He said that's the way food is. Now, I will admit that Jesus' statement goes against some of the prescriptions of various things in Leviticus, particularly chapter 11, the first 47 verses. I wanted to tell you that. So here Jesus is bringing those proscriptions, or, do not do that, and he's bringing it to say, no, now in the time has been fulfilled, when the gospel goes out to the Gentiles, yes, when you eat something, it goes in the stomach, it's gone, that's the end of it. And then Mark adds a little phrase, indicating that, of course, he's writing to a Greek-speaking Gentile audience. He says, thus he declared all foods clean. All foods clean. Big deal. Verse 20. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. Now, let me talk about the word defile a little bit. Defile, distort, twist, makes a person's life miserable. We are aware of this phenomenon in our world today. People can become so distorted of heart and mind that they don't care what happens to them. They will think about committing suicide. They will commit suicide. They'll do things that are dangerous and wild and crazy. And they may lapse into some kind of mental illness as well, because of their thoughts about who they are and themselves are so bad. They think they're just awful bad people that life is too difficult for them. In other words, their life has become defiled. It's been changed. The English word defiled doesn't really get to the depths of the Greek word here, along with its Hebrew understanding. But anyway, the idea of defiling, and I think I can look back in my life, and I have had experiences where my life has been defiled. Things that I did that were absolutely crazy, wrong, against the Word of God, against other people. Okay, I don't mind admitting it. When I was younger, I didn't like to admit it. I wanted to have a great persona. Philpott, he's that great guy, he's so perfect. I am not perfect, not anywhere close. And so I have been defiled. I've experienced that. I know what that is. And it sometimes is an emotional, mental battle to stay okay and live a life and go about doing what you're doing. You want to just hide, go away, commit suicide even. You don't care The fentanyl, bring it on. It's okay. No big deal. Persons experience their life defiled. And so Jesus says, and he says, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. In other words, what they do, not what the food they're taking in. Verse 21, for from within, out of the heart, out of the heart. That the cardia, that is the core word of who we are. You know, I could go into the various expressions we find the Greek uses for human beings, the mind, the heart, the feelings, on and on. There's about 5 major categories, but really they're all aspects of just one whole. It's a whole. From within it, with the core of us, from the heart of man come evil thoughts. Now here's this list. Evil thoughts. To hate. To be angry. Want to get even with. Evil thoughts. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to, all evil thoughts. Then he says sexual immorality. And the word in the Greek is porneia. We get our word fornicate from that word. Sexual immorality. Theft. Man, what a thief I was at one point. I got arrested for it too when I was 15 years old. Murder. Adultery. That's being married and having sexual relationship with somebody else. Coveting what somebody else has. Wickedness. Deceit. Lying. Sensuality. That would be more easily translated lewdness. Lewdness. I was thinking about the people who are making the porn films available. Who's that? Elon Musk. Oh, well. And then envy. Slander. Diminishing somebody, telling lies about somebody else to hurt them. Pride. I'm the best, man. Foolishness. Big question mark about what foolishness means. Verse 23. He says, all these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. I'm going to read Psalm 32, verses 1 through 5. Psalm of David, written 1,000 years before the days of Jesus. Psalm 32, I'm going to read the first 5 verses. He says, blessed is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. That's a parallelism. Transgression and sin are the same thing. They're gone. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity. Iniquity, sin, and transgression, they mean all the same thing. In whose spirit there is no deceit, not a lying individual. Verse 3, for when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long, with the impact of all those things that the person David has done falls on him. Verse 4, for day and night your hand was heavy upon me. The Lord was heavy upon David for what he did with his adultery with Bathsheba, killing of Bathsheba's husband, and all the other dumb stuff that David did. Through my groaning all day long, groaning. We groan. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. That's a good thing. God puts his heavy hand upon us to get us to repent and move away from what defiles. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. Verse 5, I acknowledged my sin to you. I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin. Wow. That's one of the great things about being a follower of Jesus. Yeah, we've all done weird, dumb things. I spent all those 34 years at San Quentin prison, cell to cell, Bible studies, and then for 18 years running the baseball program. And I talked to many a convict. I have contact with them still, and through gettingout.com. And some of their lives are still messed up. But when they find Jesus and they realize all the dumb stuff they did is gone and forgiven, what a difference it makes in their life. Okay, I got to hurry on. The second part, Mark 7:24-30, the Syrophoenician woman's faith. That's up alongside the northeastern shore of the Mediterranean, Tyre and Sidon. Look on the map. So Jesus' ministry in Galilee, where the Greeks are, is mostly done. Okay, I shouldn't have said Greek, but the ministry to the Jewish people in Galilee is now concluded. And so for Mark chapter 7, Mark chapter 9 is called the retirement ministry, teaching his disciples. Not so much the crowds, hoping for healing and other miracles. Verse 24. And from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon, gating away from the crowds. And he entered a house, don't know what house, and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. But immediately, one of Mark's favorite words, immediately, he could only be concealed for a time, Jesus. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. She apparently, once she heard about Jesus being in the area, she did her dead level best to find out where he was. Mark skips over that. He doesn't say, and she looked and looked and looked. He just jumps from when he heard to the point where he said, it came and fell down at his feet. Now, the woman was likely a widow, not for sure, but likely a widow. Now, the woman was a Gentile. In other words, not a Jewish person. The word in the Greek is Hellenist, a Hellenist. That means a Gentile, and a Syrophoenician by birth. So she was a native of the area of Phoenicia, and that area would have included Tyre and Sidon. It's a northeast part of the sea, the land part of the Mediterranean Sea. So she finds Jesus, and verse 26. Now the woman was a Gentile, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Now here is a very peculiar thing, brings up some interesting things. We kind of wish that the gospel writers would have been clearer about this, give us a little bit more detail. She probably heard the word about Jesus, that he did cast out demons. That kind of thing in that day was a major industry. The exorcists, which were common and had been for long periods of time, for tens of thousands of years, because the shamanistic person who could go into the trance and deal with those kinds of demons, supposedly, had been going on for a long time. Long time. Thousands of years. It was very popular in that day. A lot of people made a lot of money doing it. It was all phony. But so she heard that Jesus cast out demons. The word cast out is the word ekbalo. Ek out, balo, to throw. We get our word baseball from that. Cast out, to throw out the demon out of her daughter. Now, how would she know that her daughter had a demon in her? That's one of the things I've been trying to figure out as I've been preparing for this broadcast, and I don't really have a good understanding of it, how it is that she could have. But somehow she did. And she also had heard that Jesus cast out demons. Jesus cast out demons. Now, in the book of Acts, you're going to find a situation where one of these exorcists encountered some of the early disciples. I don't have time to go into it now, but that's in the book of Acts. And it shows you how prevalent this sort of thing was. Okay. So she had likely heard that Jesus had done this before. I don't know if you remember back, there's a number of stories where it is that Jesus cast out demons. I remember as an early Christian reading about this stuff in the New Testament, and I didn't know what to think about it. I think I thought that, oh, well, Jesus could do this, but I guess that doesn't happen anymore. Well, I later found out that that was wrong, that people did continue to do so, and in fact, I did it myself, still do it myself, and that hundreds of times. Now, I know you want to switch channels, and if you do, that makes perfect sense to me, because if I had probably been you or some of you, I would have switched channels by now. This guy's a nut here, this Philpott dude. He's a nut. Well, sorry. Anyway, it is something that is practiced all the way through the history of Christianity. Practice it now, and again, I've done it for a period of about 50 years. Very simple and very dramatic. Verse 27, and he said to her, let the children be fed first. Okay, now you got a sort of a peculiar thing that's going on here. So Jesus is in this house. This woman comes into the house, brazen. Now this woman's got courage, and she begs him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Wow. And so Jesus has this kind of very interesting reply. As I struggled with what I was going to say about this when I first had to preach it and now for here, I started to think, what is going on? You would almost have to hear the sound of his voice, the look on his face, the way he spoke, maybe the way he gestured toward the woman, how he looked at her, and so on, to grasp what is being said here. We just have the words. We can't see it. He says, let the children, who's the children? That would be Israel, an Israelite, okay? She's not an Israelite. He says, let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. The dogs, bad way of speaking about Gentile people, okay? Now, he's got to have a smile on his face. He's got to have a wink in his eye. The woman doesn't get upset. She doesn't slap him, run away, or say bad things about him. She's still there. She's hearing. They're in a conversation, and everybody's watching. I'd love to see that in film. It's somebody acting that out. So, one of my commentators says that Jesus is testing her faith. Do you really trust that I can cast the demon out of your daughter? Is that what you really think? That I can do that? And so maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the answer. Verse 28. But she answered him. Now she's a humble woman. She's humble and she's persistent. This is her daughter. She loves her daughter. There's no mention of sons. There's no mention of a husband. This may be the whole family. The mother and the daughter and the little daughter has a demon in her. So see, that's what he said. And then verse 29, and he said to her, for this statement, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter. Jesus never saw the daughter. But he says to her, the demon has left your daughter. And she shows faith in Jesus that he can do this. This is the key. She shows that she believes that Jesus can do this. How? And it's always with the word. I remember many times people hearing, oh, well, you guys do this deliverance ministry. Well, what is it? I think it's some very long, complex thing that you do, that you got to go through this rituals and et cetera, et cetera. No, it's a relatively simple little process. I've written about it in a number of books. And but he just says to her, the demon has left your daughter. Gone. She's okay. Verse 30. And she went home. She did as Jesus said. She didn't argue with him. She went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. Now, how did she know the demon was gone? Well, it's pretty easy to understand. There was no more weirdness, loud screaming, awful language coming out of this girl, completely belligerent. They probably had to have her tied down. Who knows? So that's what happened. So we have this very unusual deliverance thing, and you have to ask yourself, how did this news get to Jesus? How was it that Mark could write, and she went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone? How is that this appears here? Well, it is very likely that she and probably her daughter became disciples of Jesus. Some of the most outstanding followers of Jesus that I've ever met were people that previously had been involved in occult activities, had been to a psychic. Yeah, the psychic was going to give you true knowledge, and if it didn't work, they'd pay your money back, and all that stuff that's going on. You know, you just do the tarot card thing, you do the ancestral worship, on and on and on. You do this, and you might see some spiritual things happen, but it's not of the Holy Spirit. So anyway, we had hard to know. So closing thoughts is the Messiah would come to Israel, offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But in the ministry of Jesus, we now see it expanding and connecting with Gentile people. And even at Pentecost, we find primarily Jewish people were there, but also Gentiles as well. So there are always going to be these sorts of controversies. I know out there, you guys, Christianity is also confusing, just more religion. And I know, it makes me sick too. I just go for a simple being a follower of Jesus, trusting in Him, reading His Word, praying to Him, and telling others about Jesus. So long.